The air was cold and sharp, biting at any exposed skin it could find. It was one of those winter mornings where the world seems to hibernate under a thick blanket of snow, silent and expectant. My breath formed small clouds of mist as I stood outside our family's country house, a modest structure nestled against the backdrop of a dense, seemingly endless forest. This place, secluded and serene, had become a sanctuary for us, especially around the New Year's Eve. My father, a man of few words but many thoughts, was already busy preparing for our expedition. He had this tradition, a sacred ritual almost, of hunting in these woods every winter. The forest was his escape, his connection to something primal and untouched. I remember looking at him as he moved about, his actions deliberate and practiced. He wore an old sweater, faded and frayed at the edges, each tear a testament to his many adventures. His boots, caked with mud and snow, told stories of their own. He had this aura of quiet confidence, a man in his element, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and nervous excitement. We were packing our backpacks with necessities, food, water, a first aid kit, and other essentials. My father's rifle, an aged but well-maintained piece, lay against the wooden porch, its presence both ominous and reassuring. He handled it with respect, a respect he intended to teach me. The forest awaited us, a world of its own, untamed and indifferent to our presence. As we set off, the crunch of snow under our boots was the only sound in the still morning. The trees, towering and solemn, stood like sentinels guarding the secrets of the woods. My father led the way, his steps sure and steady. I followed, trying to match his pace, trying to read the language of the forest as he did. He pointed out tracks in the snow, signs of life amidst the winter stillness. To him, these were more than mere markings. They were stories, clues to understanding the rhythm of nature. Our conversation was sparse, but meaningful. He spoke of his first hunt, of the lessons he had learned, of respect for the forest and its inhabitants. He spoke of patience, of understanding that we were just small parts of a larger, more intricate tapestry. The tracks of the deer led us deeper, each step a foray into a world unknown. My father, with eyes sharp as the winter air, followed the trail with a hunter's focus. I, in my youthful eagerness, kept pace, my heart racing with the thrill of the chase. There was something almost mystical about the way the deer eluded us. It was as if the creature was part of the forest itself, always a shadow, always just beyond reach. The snow crunched beneath our boots, a steady rhythm in the quiet world. As we ventured further, time seemed to lose its grip. The sun, a distant, muted orb, filtered through the dense canopy, casting a dappled pattern on the snow. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and earth, a fragrance that spoke of ageless cycles and secrets held close by the land. It was then that we noticed the other tracks, peculiar and intriguing. They were unlike any I had seen before, larger, with a pattern that spoke of a creature unknown. My father's eyes narrowed as he examined them, the excitement of the unknown adding a new dimension to our expedition. Driven by curiosity and the allure of discovery, we followed these new tracks. The forest around us seemed to change, the trees older, their branches twisted into gnarled shapes, like silent sentinels of a forgotten realm. The light dimmed, the shadows grew longer, and the air turned colder. I felt a twinge of unease, the comfort of the familiar giving way to the thrill of the unknown. My father, however, remained undeterred, his confidence a beacon in the enveloping mystery. He moved with purpose, his gaze alternating between the ground and the horizon. We found ourselves in a part of the forest that felt untouched, primeval. The sounds were different here, more subdued, as if the forest was holding its breath. The tracks led us through a thicket, the branches parting reluctantly to let us pass. As the day wore on, the realization that we were far from familiar territory began to dawn on me. I looked to my father, searching for any sign of doubt, but found none. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest transformed. A thick fog, like a living entity, seeped through the trees, wrapping everything in a ghostly embrace. The cold of the winter evening melded with the dampness of the fog, creating an eerie, surreal atmosphere. The familiar landmarks of the forest, once clear in the daylight, now appeared alien, shrouded in mist. The ground beneath our feet, once a reliable guide, now felt strange and untrustworthy. Each step became a question, every path a puzzle. The trails, which we had followed with such certainty, now seemed to mock us with their sameness. The towering trees, once majestic, now loomed like specters, their branches swaying gently in the whispering wind. Visibility dwindled to mere paces, the world reduced to shadows and silhouettes. There was a flicker of concern in my father's eyes. He pulled out his old compass, an heirloom of many journeys, but to our dismay, it had succumbed to the elements, its needle spinning aimlessly. We tried to recall the path we had taken, retracing our steps in our minds, but the forest had changed its face. The trails, once distinct, now blended into one another, a labyrinth with no exit. As darkness enveloped the woods, the reality of our situation sank in. We were lost, truly lost, in the heart of an unforgiving wilderness. The night, with its impenetrable darkness, brought a chill that seeped into our bones. Resigned to our fate, we set about making a fire. Gathering dry wood was a challenge in the dampness of the forest, but necessity lent us determination. My father, with practiced hands, coaxed flames from the reluctant kindling. The fire, once alive, became our sanctuary, its warmth a barrier against the cold, its light a shield against the darkness. We huddled close, the fire casting flickering shadows on our faces. The crackling of the flames was a comforting sound, a reminder that we were not entirely at the mercy of the forest. Our conversation, initially focused on finding a way out, gradually turned into reflections on our predicament. My father, ever the philosopher, mused on the unpredictability of nature, on the humility it teaches. I listened, my mind a whirl of thoughts and emotions. Fear, awe, frustration, and a grudging respect for the wilds mingled within me. We discussed our plans for dawn, weighing our options. Should we try to retrace our steps, or forge ahead in hopes of finding a way out? The night, already cold and unforgiving, took on a new dimension of terror as my father's hand, icy and firm, jolted me awake. His eyes, wide and alert, bore a look I had never seen in them before. Fear. "Wake up, son," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. His finger on his lips signaled the need for silence, a gesture that sent a chill down my spine. I rose slowly, my body stiff from the cold, my mind racing to comprehend the situation. My father's gaze was fixated on the dark edge of the forest, where the shadows of the trees merged with the obsidian night. As I followed his gaze, I discerned a vague, unsettling movement among the trees. Something large and indistinct loomed in the darkness, its form shrouded in mystery. "Do you see it?" my father asked in a hushed tone. I nodded, though my heart pounded fiercely in my chest. The unknown entity, barely visible in the dim light, moved with a deliberate, almost cautious grace. It was too massive to be any ordinary animal, its presence too unnerving to be anything familiar. We sat motionless, our breaths shallow, eyes riveted on the dark silhouette. The creature's movements were eerily silent, its form intermittently visible as it navigated through the trees. My mind raced with possibilities. Bears, perhaps, or some other large predator native to these woods. But something about it felt different, menacing, an unknown threat lurking in the shadows. The creature, as if aware of our gaze, shifted its path, its movements directed towards us. My father's reaction was instantaneous. He reached for his rifle, his movements swift and silent. Aiming into the darkness, he fired a single shot towards the creature. The sound shattered the night's silence, echoing through the trees. "Run!" he commanded in a terse whisper. I grabbed my backpack, my body responding before my mind could process the danger. We ran, the forest floor uneven beneath our feet, the darkness enveloping us. The adrenaline surged through my veins, fueling my steps as we fled through the forest. My father was behind me, his presence a reassuring force amidst the chaos. His voice, urgent and commanding, urged me to keep moving. The trees blurred past us, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The wind howled through the forest, mingling with the sound of our desperate flight. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent waves of fear coursing through me. The forest, with its relentless expanse, seemed to mock our efforts to escape its grasp. Each step was a battle against the snow, a struggle against the cold wind that bit into our flesh, unyielding and cruel. The frost adorned the trees like a ghostly embrace, a reminder of nature's indifferent majesty. Our pace, once swift in flight, now waned under the weight of exhaustion. My legs were heavy, each movement a test of will, while my heart pounded a frantic rhythm in my chest. Father, though appearing strong, was clearly feeling tired as well. His breath came in labored gasps, the frost clinging to his beard, his eyes reflecting a weariness that went beyond the physical. It was then, amidst the white expanse of snow and the skeletal branches, that the manor house appeared. An apparition in the wilderness. It stood, stately and surreal, among the dense trees, a relic of another time, another world. The snow around it was strangely absent, as if the grounds were tended by unseen hands. The house itself, with its white Doric columns and a covered driveway that curled away into the shadows, exuded an eerie grandeur. The gravel road leading to the estate seemed incongruous in the wilderness, a path to an unknown destination. How could there be a manor house here? I wondered aloud, my voice a whisper in the wind. Shh. Let's be quiet and listen, my father cautioned, his gaze scanning the surroundings. We stood in silence, the only sounds the rustling of the dry branches and a faint creaking that could have been a door or a shutter swaying in the wind. The manor, for all its imposing presence, appeared abandoned, a forgotten sentinel in the heart of the forest. Perhaps we should go in, my father finally said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach. The thought of entering the unknown manor was as daunting as it was enticing. The promise of warmth and shelter was a siren call, yet the house's isolation and eerie perfection were disquieting. Dad, let's not go, I pleaded, my voice barely above a murmur. Don't be afraid, we will only look, my father reassured me, his words more for himself than for me. Reluctantly, I followed him towards the manor. The gravel crunched beneath our feet, a stark contrast to the muffled silence of the snow-covered forest. The approach to the manor house, along the winding driveway, was a journey through an eerily tranquil world. Patches of snow, untouched and pristine, lay scattered, a testament to the solitude that enveloped the place. The tall hedge, its branches dry and turquoise, stood like a silent sentinel, guarding the secrets within. An ancient bird's nest, nestled in the thickest branches, was a reminder of life that once thrived here. As we stood before the entrance, I couldn't help but be drawn to the facade of the house. The brickwork was meticulous, a craft of a bygone era. The bricks, handmade and irregular, hinted at a time when this place was more than just an abandoned relic. I imagined workers digging up clay from the very ground we stood on, laying the foundation of this once grand estate. The columns, their paint spiraling off in curls, bore the marks of neglect, the shattered awning a sign of decay. Above us, a lantern hung on a long chain, swaying gently in the wind, its light long extinguished. Clinging tightly to my father's hand, I ascended the steps, my body trembling. Whether from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. One of the windows, slightly ajar, revealed a rope stretched through it, one end disappearing into the dark interior of the house, the other lost to the snowy grounds outside. Crossing the terrace, my father's grip on my hand was firm, a silent reassurance in the face of our shared apprehension. We approached the window, peering into the shadows within. "Dad, do you see anything out there?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Shh. No one is here," he replied, his eyes scanning the darkness. The urge to flee, to escape this place, welled up inside me. "Let's get out of here, Dad," I pleaded, my voice tinged with fear. My father's gaze met mine, stern and unwavering. "There's this unknown beast waiting for us in the forest. We have nowhere to run, you understand? We have no choice. We'll hide here for now," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty of our situation. "Everything will be fine," he added. Reluctantly, I nodded, the weight of our predicament sinking in. The manor, despite its foreboding presence, was our only refuge from the unknown terror that lurked in the forest. My father's hand on the door was steady, yet the massive brass hinges protested with a groan as the door swung open. We paused, our senses heightened, listening to the silence that enveloped the manor. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and damp, the weight of years pressed down upon us. Stepping into the lobby, the grandeur of the past confronted us. The floor, a checkerboard of black and white marble tiles, stretched out before us, reminiscent of a set of dominoes frozen mid-game. The wide staircase, leading to the second floor, loomed like a sentinel, its once proud elegance now marred by time. The wallpaper, expensive in its day, hung in clumps on the walls, stained and streaked with the trails of damp. On the ceiling, the water-swollen lime protruded in places, grotesque and bulbous, like the belly of a gluttonous man. The molding, yellowed with age, adorned with a pattern of triangles, had warped and pulled away from the walls, a sign of the house's long neglect. To the left, we entered what must have once been the dining room. A large walnut sideboard, its doors and drawers long gone, stood as a hollow shell of its former self. The grandeur it once represented was reduced to a mere hulk, a testament to the relentless march of time. In the corner of the room lay a mountainous pile of clothes, not just clothes, but shoes, belts, coats, blankets, old sleeping bags, and backpacks. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. My father, his expression grim, reloaded the shotgun. The sound of the shells clicking into place was unnerving, a stark reminder of the danger that lurked both within and outside these walls. His grip on the weapon was tight, a silent promise of protection. We crossed the lobby, each step echoing in the vast emptiness of the manor. On the opposite side, we entered a room, or rather, a hall of considerable size. The ceiling stretched high above us, adding to the room's imposing atmosphere. The fireplace, lined with ordinary bricks, bore the scars of a mantelpiece and hearth surround long since stripped away. In front of it, scattered mattresses lay on the floor, a makeshift camp in the heart of the manor. The floor was covered in black dog hair, a stark contrast to the worn bricks of the fireplace. "Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible, a mix of fear and curiosity in my tone. "Quiet," my father cautioned, his eyes scanning the hall. His posture was tense, ready for any sign of danger. The hall, with its high ceiling and scattered remnants of occupancy, felt like a sanctuary that had been violated. The presence of the mattresses and the dog hair suggested recent inhabitants, their stories as mysterious as the manor itself. In the gloom of the hall, the smoky pots around the fireplace appeared like relics of a forgotten ritual. My father, with a cautious hand, squatted and lifted one. He sniffed at its contents, a frown creasing his brow, before setting it back with a clatter. Rising, he gazed out the window. Outside, the gray, trampled grass was a stark contrast to the surrounding snow. The rope that we had seen earlier, stretched through the window, was tied to a brass bell. This bell, a primitive alarm system, was fastened to a homemade wooden clamp nailed to the frame. It was a jarring sight, this crude mechanism in such a grand setting. Taking my hand, my father led me down a narrow, dark hallway toward the kitchen. The air grew heavier, the smell of rot and feces mingling with the omnipresent scent of wool. Wool. It seemed to be everywhere in the house, a constant, unnerving presence. The kitchen was in disarray, trash strewn about carelessly. The sink, stained with rust, bore silent witness to years of neglect. The stench was overwhelming, a visceral assault on the senses. We continued to a small room adjacent to the kitchen, probably once a pantry. There, on the floor, lay a door or trapdoor, sealed shut with a large steel plate lock. Its presence was an enigma, a silent challenge to the curious and the brave. I felt a surge of panic. "Dad, let's get out of here. There's something wrong here," I pleaded, my voice quivering with fear. My father, however, seemed captivated, his curiosity piqued by the mystery before us. "I wonder why she was locked up," he mused, his gaze fixed on the trapdoor. Desperation clawed at me, and I found myself on the brink of tears. "Well, Dad, what are we doing here?" I cried out, my voice breaking with emotion. "Looking for cover," he replied, his tone practical yet strained. I don't have much ammo, son, he added, a hint of concern in his eyes. We need a crowbar or something, he said, his mind already searching for a solution. His words did little to soothe my growing dread. The house, with its secrets and shadows, felt like a trap, closing in around us. The trap door, with its heavy lock, was a silent testament to the mysteries that lay hidden beneath our feet. Stepping out the back door into the cold, the rifle felt heavy in my hands, a tangible weight of our situation. My father paused, surveying the yard with a practiced eye. The driveway, paved with bricks, was flanked by shapeless, thorny bushes, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. Atop brick pillars, someone had mounted an old iron harrow, a relic of a bygone era. Above it, a cast-iron boiler of 150 liters loomed, a ghost from the past when it was used for heating pork fat. Below it, the remnants of a fire, ashes and charred wood, spoke of recent activity, a sign that we were not the first to seek refuge here. Off to the side, a wagon on rubber tires sat, its purpose in this forgotten place a mystery. In the far corner of the yard, an old smokehouse and a shed for gardening tools beckoned. "Let's go there," my father suggested, his voice a low murmur against the wind. I nodded, my every step cautious, my senses heightened. The fear that gripped me was more than just a reaction to the cold. It was a primal response to the unknown, to the sense that something unseen lurked in the shadows. The barn, with its array of tools, was a testament to the manor's past. We sifted through the implements, searching for something that could aid us. Finally, our eyes settled on a long-handled shovel, its blade worn but sturdy, a tool that promised utility in our current predicament. Back in the storeroom, we worked with a desperate urgency. The wood around the lock was old and weathered, giving way under the persistent chipping of the shovel. Only then were we able to wedge the sharp edge beneath the bracket, applying all our strength to pry it open. The lock, firmly anchored to the hatch, resisted our efforts, a stubborn guardian of the secrets below. At last, with a concerted effort, we lifted the hatch cover, sliding the shovel underneath for leverage. My father, his hands steady, took out a lighter and positioned himself at the edge. He lifted the hatch higher, his body tensed as he grasped it with his hands and tilted it until it fell to the floor with a heavy thud. "Wait for me here," he instructed, his voice a low rumble in the quiet of the room. "I'm with you," I replied, the words slipping out before I could consider them. The thought of staying alone in the storeroom, surrounded by the unknown, was more terrifying than whatever lay beneath. "Isn't it scary?" he asked, looking back at me. "Scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "All right, follow me, just keep up," he said, a note of resolve in his voice. We began our descent, the rough wooden steps groaning under our weight. My father flicked his lighter, the small flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air grew colder, the dampness more oppressive with each step we took. The stench that greeted us was unbearable, a miasma of decay and neglect. I clung to the back of my dad's jacket, a lifeline in the darkness. My eyes, adjusting to the dim light, made out the outline of a stone wall and a clay floor. In a corner lay an old mattress, its surface marred with dark stains, a silent witness to unspeakable events. Down one more step, and my father stretched his arm, the lighter's flame reaching out into the darkness. He stopped abruptly, his body rigid with shock. I halted behind him, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath caught in my throat. Before us, illuminated in the flickering light, was a sight that froze my blood. The scene that unfolded before us in the cellar was a tableau of human misery, a grotesque distortion of life. Naked men and women were huddled against the back wall, their hands covering their faces, as if to shield themselves from the horror of their existence. The wounds and abrasions on their bodies were a silent testimony to their suffering. Among them, on the mattress, lay a woman, her legs amputated at the hips, the stumps blackened and burned. The air was heavy with a stench that was unbearable, a miasma of decay and despair. The fear in their eyes was palpable, a raw, primal terror that spoke of unimaginable horrors. I turned to my father, and in his face, I saw a mirror of their fear, his features etched with horror and disbelief. "Oh my God," he whispered, his voice a ghost of its usual strength. The people in the cellar, their eyes squinting against the dim light of the lighter, began to turn towards us, their faces etched with desperation. "Help," they whispered, their voices a chorus of misery. "Save us," they implored, their pleas growing louder. "God," my father repeated, his voice trembling. He turned to me, grabbed my arm, and shouted, "Hurry, let's run!" In his panic, he dropped the lighter, its flame extinguishing as it hit the ground. There was no time to search for it. He pushed me towards the stairs, urgency propelling his actions. "Help us!" The voices continued to echo as we scrambled upwards. At the base of the stairs, a bearded, gaunt face appeared. A man with his arms missing, his expression one of desperate pleading. "Please leave the lid open. They are out there, in the woods. But don't close the lid, please," he beseeched us. "Hurry up! For heaven's sake!" my father roared, his voice filled with a mix of fear and determination. He pushed me out of the cellar, and I stumbled into the pantry, collapsing onto the floor. My father followed, quickly grabbing his gun, his eyes darting to the cellar lid. He paused, a moment of hesitation flashing across his face, the weight of the decision evident in his expression. What was he thinking in that moment of pause? Was it empathy for the suffering souls below, or the primal instinct of survival? He turned his attention to the window, listening intently, his eyes scanning the outside world. Then, suddenly, he sat down sharply, his expression changing to one of urgent caution. "Run!" he whispered fiercely. We whirled towards the front door, our movements frantic, driven by the fear and horror of what we had witnessed. The manor proved to be a trap, its secrets too dark, too terrifying to comprehend. We whirled towards the front door, our movements frantic, driven by the fear and horror of what we had witnessed. The manor, once a mysterious and foreboding presence, now felt like a trap, its secrets too dark, too terrible to comprehend. As we raced through the house, the echoes of our footsteps were a cacophony in the silence. The shadows seemed to reach out towards us, the darkness a tangible entity in our flight. The front door loomed before us, an escape from the nightmare we had stumbled into. My father flung it open, the cold outside air rushing in to meet us. The freedom it offered was a stark contrast to the suffocating horror of the cellar. We burst into the open, the wind biting at our faces, the manor receding into the background. Our escape through the driveway was a frantic dash for survival, the manor a looming specter in the moonlit night. The hedge of turquoise trees offered a semblance of cover, their branches swaying in the cold breeze. As we weaved through them, the rustle of leaves and crunch of frozen earth underfoot were the only sounds in the still night. Abruptly, a noise from the house halted our flight. We turned, and my heart froze. Emerging from the manor were the naked people we had left in the cellar, their forms ghostly in the dim light. They stumbled out, disoriented, their movements slow and uncertain. But it was not just them that drew our attention. On the other side of the house, near the edge of the trees, shadows moved, at first indistinct, then horrifyingly clear under the moon's glow. There, a man, unnaturally tall, stood beside a woman of similar stature. Between them, they pushed a cart, carrying a large black creature, reminiscent of a dog or a wolf, yet distinctly more sinister. The sight was surreal, a nightmarish vision that defied explanation. Without warning, the man halted, his gaze fixed on the people emerging from the house. In a swift, terrifying motion, he abandoned the cart and charged towards the house. His transformation was grotesque. He dropped to all fours, his movements becoming animalistic, his speed increasing as he closed in on the frightened escapees. I turned to the woman, my heart pounding with dread. Before my eyes, she underwent a monstrous change. Under the cold moonlight, she morphed into a large, black creature covered in fur. With an animalistic roar, she too dropped to all fours and raced towards the house, her form a blur of fury and primal instinct. The scene unfolding before us was one of chaos and terror. The people, naked and vulnerable, scattered in panic, their escape cut off by these nightmarish predators. The creatures moved with a predatory grace, their actions driven by a hunger that was palpable even from our distance. I clung to my father, my body trembling with fear. The horror of what we were witnessing was overwhelming, a brutal reminder of the darkness that lay beyond the realm of human understanding. My father, his face a mask of horror, gripped the rifle tightly. The horror of what we had witnessed rooted me to the spot, a paralysis born of fear and disbelief. My father's firm grip on my shoulder broke the trance, his urgent words propelling us into motion. "Run fast," he commanded, and we sprinted across a small field, plunging into the dense cover of the forest. His rifle, a solid weight in his hands, was a silent testament to the danger we were fleeing. "We must run," he repeated, his voice a steady drumbeat in the chaos. "While they are distracted, run as far as you can, don't stop." His words were a lifeline, pulling me through the terror that threatened to engulf me. Our flight through the forest was a blur of motion and fear. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic rhythm that matched our desperate pace. A coughing fit threatened to overtake me, the urge to vomit nearly overwhelming, but I stifled it, suppressing the noise for fear of drawing the creature's attention. We reached a hillock, and behind it, a small hollow offered a semblance of shelter. We quickly hid, my father's head barely lifting as he surveyed our surroundings. "Quiet. Keep your head down," he whispered, his eyes scanning the shadowy forest. "Are they coming this way?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "No," he replied, his gaze still fixed on the darkness beyond our hiding place. We crawled across the snow-covered ground, the cold seeping through our clothes, a sharp contrast to the heat of our flight. The forest around us was a world of shadows and whispers, a landscape transformed by the horror of what lurked within. Then, cutting through the silence, came a sound that will haunt me forever. The screams of the people in the forest pierced the night, a chorus of terror and despair. Their cries for help, the sounds of their futile attempts to escape, were a symphony of human suffering. I covered my ears with my hands, trying to block out the horrific sounds, but their screams echoed in my mind, a relentless reminder of the nightmare unfolding around us. My father sat beside me, his face set in a grim mask, his rifle aimed into the void, ready to confront the evil that stalked the night. We remained in that hollow until morning, the hours stretching into an eternity of fear and vigilance. The forest around us remained still, neither the people nor the monstrous creatures making an appearance. The screams had long since faded, leaving behind a haunting silence. With the first light of dawn, we ventured out of our hiding place. The forest, bathed in the soft glow of morning, was a stark contrast to the darkness of the night. We found a highway and followed it to the nearest town, the normalcy of the road a surreal experience after the horrors we had endured. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed, my body and mind succumbing to the fear and exhaustion. My father had spoken to the police, his words a muted buzz in the background of my consciousness. What happened to those people, the fate that befell them, remained a mystery, one that my father refused to discuss. He wanted me to forget, to move on from the nightmare we had survived, but the screams of those people were etched into my soul, a haunting melody that played in my dreams, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows of the world.